ビデオ
A few weeks ago, I talked about Catnapped, a fantastical children's film from the 90s that had beautiful animation woven within its chaotic tone. It was directed by Takashi Nakamura, who had done a short for Robot Carnival a few years back. A few weeks later, I talked about Golden Boy, a goofy sex comedy OVA also from the mid-90s that also had great animation that emphasized the OVA's slapstick nature. It was directed by Hiroyuki Kitakubo, who also had done a short for Robot Carnival a few years back. And let's not forget that, just a year ago, I started out this series with a video on Robot Carnival and its overall history. You know, just in case I didn't mention that enough in my last video. So with all of this in mind, I think the time is right to talk about the other Robot Carnival. What information I could find for this work is scant, so bear with me here. But sometime around the mid-80s, Studio Madhouse decided to produce a short feature with the goal of showing off the production skills of their staff. The idea was to get 3 of their staff members to adapt and direct a short film, each based on a short story by Japanese sci-fi writer Takuma Yamura, then have a small team of their choosing to animate it. The shorts would then be compiled into one feature. The directors were as follows. The first being Madhouse co-founder Shigeyuki Hayashi, or as he's known by his more well-known pseudonym, Rentaro. Already a seasoned veteran of the industry, having worked for Tezuka's Mushi Productions, Rentaro already had a number of films under his belt at this point and was easily the most experienced of the 3. The second was other Madhouse co-founder Yoshiaki Kawajiri. While having already made his directorial debut with the Lensman movie, Kawajiri had not yet made a name for himself at the time production began. He was still working on his breakout film Wicked City around the same time as this project. And lastly, Katsuhiro Otomo. Already a manga superstar with his cyberpunk epic Akira, this project was Otomo's first real major break in the animation industry, and as we'll see later, it will be the proving grounds for his world-changing film a year later. These 3 directors, along with a cadre of Madhouse's finest animators, created 3 shorts that were combined into a short anthology feature known as Manie-manie, Meikyo Monogatari, or in English, Labyrinth Tales. The feature became a popular fixture amongst Japanese film festivals and the video cassette markets. Years later, its popularity would catch the eye of One Streamline Productions. Still high off their well-paid-off gamble with Akira, and seeing their new Golden Boy Otomo's name attached to it, Streamline immediately bought the license, and in their desire to make it clear that the director of Akira was attached to this, they bestowed onto Meikyo Monogatari the totally generic, non-indicative title of Neo Tokyo. Neo Tokyo, yes, we're going to be calling it that for the remainder of the review, feels like the type of anime that's just barely on the verge of being erased from history. Not only is it a feature that appears to be overshadowed by its bigger, more bombastic sibling, but just looking at the price of its long out-of-print DVD is just enough to send a sharp bolt of pain up your bank account. Which is funny because Robot Carnival was in a very similar situation up until recently. And thanks to the benevolent licensing gods at Discotek and their Blu-rays, Robot Carnival is slowly but surely getting more recognition by the day. But where does that leave Neo Tokyo? At the time of this video, it has no such release, and for now, it's just another anime condemned to float around file sharing sites as a means of survival. And this has had an effect on how people perceive the film. Most people either regard it as just a footnote in Otomo's or Kawajiri's creative legacy, or even just Robot Carnival's quote-unquote prototype. And I don't think that's very fair. For this video, we'll be trying something a little bit different. We're going to start things off by going over each of the 3 shorts as their own individual piece. And by the end, we'll take everything we know and see how it all fits together, and whether or not it's equal to Robot Carnival. Maybe even, dare I say, better. First, let's start things off with Rentaro's short, Labyrinth Labyrinthos. The short / kinda sorta framing device revolves around a young girl named Sachi playing hide and seek with her cat Cicerone. The outcome of this ends up with her finding a mysterious doorway to a labyrinth world full of strange oddities, ultimately leading the girl and her cat to a circus tent where the rest of the short films are shown to her. First of all, I don't think I'm overstepping my boundaries by saying this is easily the weakest of the 3 films in terms of narrative. Dialogue is sparse. only serving in the beginning to tell us the characters' names and backgrounds, and from there going completely silent. It almost defies the notion of having plot, preferring to fully immerse you into a surrealist dreamscape with few questions asked and even fewer answered. In short, it's less a story and more of a visual experience. Think Yume Nikki, but with less plot. Said visuals? There is nothing like the visuals seen in Labyrinth Labyrinthos, and I mean that in the sincerest fashion. What we see here is a jaw-droppingly gorgeous amalgamation of traditional Japanese art, Showa-era television style, and most strikingly, German expressionism. It creates a unique atmosphere that's perfect for the setting, giving the world a feeling of both childlike wonder and unsettling nightmarishness. Rentaro does a really good job of disorienting the audience to add to the surreal, dreamlike tone of the piece, making the use of low angles, Dutch angles, multiple cuts, distorting the frame. Special mention goes to the editing, which makes the piece feel even more like a dream. There are times in the piece where the imagery will just lull you into a hypnotic state through its slow, methodical pace and minimalist sound design. Then BAM! The scene is changed violently through a sudden sound or image shattering the calm. This is done intentionally to give the audience the feeling of being in a dream, and how one part of it can suddenly shift to another, more unsettling part without warning. But if you ask me, the real MVPs of this piece are the animators, specifically Atsuko Fukushima and Manabu Ohashi, both of whom you might know from, that's right, Robot Carnival. Atsuko Fukushima probably deserves the most credit for capturing the entire mood of Labyrinth Labyrinthos through her character designs and animation. Her animation style is the main ingredient for helping blend the styles of German expressionism with traditional Japanese art so seamlessly, combining perfectly flat, high-contrast drawings with sketchy, heavily shaded drawings and animating them so smoothly together, almost making the world feel like it's something out of a storybook. To say nothing of her one-of-a-kind character designs. As seen in Robot Carnival, Fukushima's character designs are very atypical of anime of the time. Very scrawny, very limber character designs with very few hints that they are in fact human. The design of Sachi, for instance, feels more like a throwback to the early days of manga and anime, with her simple body shape and facial features, along with having a color scheme that emphasizes contrast between dark blacks, bright whites, and glowing reds. And yet, she still manages to show a full range of subtle emotion in her expressions and body language. It makes her very endearing as a protagonist, despite knowing very little about her true character. As for the other MVP, Manabu Ohashi, he really brings his talent in making the characters move. A longtime industry vet since the days of Tezuka, Ohashi is a master of character animation and the blending of styles. There's a sense of old school whimsy in his scenes, mixing perfectly detailed animation with cartoony television-style comedic character acting. But really, the gorgeous visuals are all Labyrinth Labyrinthos has. It's a visually stunning piece that's made specifically to bookend the other two shorts. The focus is purely on the animation, nothing more. Plus, there's some moments in the piece where you just gotta go, okay, now you're just showing off. But it does its job of showcasing the abilities of these talented animators, unbound by the budgetary leash. And we'll also see how that's used in a different style with Yoshiaki Kawajiri's The Running Man. Out of all the shorts from Neo Tokyo, Kawajiri's The Running Man might be the most well known. Its appearance on MTV's Liquid Television in 1992 was some people's first exposure to anime, and if that's the case, it's a pretty big first impression. In the future, champion driver Zach Hugh has raced in a deadly Formula 1 style race known as Death Circus for 10 years. The reason why he's raced for so long in a sport where the life expectancy for racers is 1 to 2 years at the most is because he has powerful telekinetic abilities that can destroy other racers in his way. On what we can assume is his 10th anniversary racing, he ends up literally destroying the competition and winning the race. But there's a problem. Not only is he not stopping and only speeding up after the checkered flag has been waved, but according to the readings seen by his pit crew, Zack Hugh is dead. Now you would expect a short about a deadly race would be a very loud and very high-paced spectacle, but it's quite the opposite here. The whole tone of the piece is reminiscent of a film noir, and I'm not just saying that because everyone looks like extras from Batman the Animated Series. The atmosphere is dark, dusky, and oppressive, fueled by heavy shadows and hazy lighting. Scenes will often be dominated by one color scheme from cold and feeling blues to burning hellish reds and oranges. But easily the best part of this short is the level of detail of, well, everything. This level of hand-drawn craftsmanship is the stuff you could only get in a time where everyone in Japan was flush with cash. It's not enough that Kawajiri and his team make an anime about a futuristic racing incident. Oh no, they gotta draw everything. When a window or a light shatters, we need to see every pane and shard drop down. When we look at a vehicle, we need to see every single moving part and panel. When Zack Hugh uses his psychic abilities, we need to see every particle of dust rise up around him as his veins painfully bulge beneath his skin. And when a vehicle crashes, we need to see every part crumble and burst into flames along with every spark in those flames. Narrative-wise, while not to the level of Labyrinthos, is still kept to a minimalist standard. Zack Hugh, despite being the protagonist, has 0 lines of dialogue aside from pained grunts and screams. The whole story is relayed to us by a reporter who serves as a narrator for the whole piece. Even the sound design is restrained. There's no music until the end, and a lot of what we hear is the hum of engines and the beeping of computers punctuated by the occasional crash. It's all there to help build tension for the climax of the shorts. At the beginning, the race goes along smoothly but still keeps an air of suspense in the air. For instance, the first sound we hear in Running Man is Zack's heartbeat. The sounds all build from there, as Zack's psychic abilities grow more and more intense as the race wears on. Glass begins to shatter, metal begins to crunch, flames begin to roar, life support systems blare warnings to terminate. Even after the finish line is crossed, the tension is still there because Zack keeps going. Then it all goes quiet momentarily again as we begin to see things from Zack's point of view. He sees a group of spectral racers in front of him, spirits he needs to beat by any means necessary. They are unaffected by his psychic abilities no matter how much he strains. The atmosphere grows more and more tighter as Zack's machine begins to crumble and his facial features begin to twist and distort out of sheer pain. And then... Finally, the short's only piece of music kicks in. A slow, methodical dirge as both Zack and his vehicle are torn asunder by his own abilities. It's a very strong climax as you feel the heat of the flames and the sound of every part of the vehicle crashing on the track. Along with the music, it gives an element of tragedy to this piece that's unexpected, but still fits. The only problem that Running Man has is that this scene feels like it's missing an element that would have made for much stronger pathos. Thanks to his minimalist storytelling, we don't really know the reason why Zack Hugh desired to win that bad to the point of physical pain and destruction. Guess it's implied that he wanted to see if he could outrace death itself, and that's what's tragic about it, but that's still not much to go on. We don't know if it was that, or the desire to keep his title, or if he was driving and striving and hugging the turns because he was thinking of someone for whom he still burns. It's still a strong piece, but is it the best piece? Well, we can fully judge that once we take a look at the final short, Katsuhiro Otomo's Construction Cancellation Order. Being Otomo's first real foray into directing an anime, Construction Cancellation Order has a lot of elements that would define most of his later work. The basic premise involves a lowly salaryman named Sugioka being sent to South America by his company to their latest construction project, Facility 444. A regime change has resulted in the newly installed government refusing to honor the contract, and thus construction on the facility has to be shut down and salvaged before it costs the company even more money. However, since production is completely automated, the crew is staffed entirely by robots who are programmed to finish the job regardless of the consequences, and Sugioka is about to learn the hard way that the machines are prepared to eliminate anything that gets in the way of finishing the project.
Number 444-1, let me out of here!
These robots have gone mad! They're trying to kill me!
Let me out!
Like the other two, Construction Cancellation Order is a remarkable piece in terms of animation. This could be contributed by the fact that Otomo has two talented animators on his team, Koji Morimoto and Takashi Nakamura, both of whom you might remember from, yeah, you get the idea. Koji Morimoto doesn't have too many noteworthy scenes here, but he does do a great job of establishing the jungle primeval setting in the opening shot, which works well given his talent for building an atmosphere. Takashi Nakamura, on the other hand, really gets to show off in this short. Both him and Otomo are masters when it comes to illustrating technology as this giant, all-consuming monstrosity. The setting is a good example of this. The opening is a boat ride that transitions from untamed jungle into the more industrial setting of Facility 444. But when we get through the gates, what we see is an incongruous mess of buildings, factories, and machinery, all in a disorganized, twisted mass of urban architecture that appears to be trying and failing to stop being reclaimed by the rainforest. It gives you a feeling that this place is a blight and should not exist, and the sooner they get it shut down, the better. All of this is emphasized with a piano score that's both industrious yet discordant, like a broken factory. That's not even getting into the robot workers themselves, which Nakamura does an excellent job in portraying them as broken down pieces of machinery that can barely function, spewing out smoke and sparks and shaking from the stress of their own programming. But even with that in mind, Nakamura still makes a point about how much of a threat these robots are when they will follow their programming to the letter.
All further on-site inspections by Superintendent have been cancelled.
This actually ties into why Construction Cancellation Order is the strongest from a narrative standpoint. Construction Cancellation Order is, at its center, a dark, Kafka-esque satire about Japanese work culture. We've all heard the stories about Japanese office workers who work themselves to death in order to fit the get-the-job-done culture of the Japanese workplace. It's gotten to the point where the Japanese language has a word for it. Construction Cancellation Order not only shows us that it unfortunately isn't a new phenomenon, but also completely exposes the sheer absurdity of both it and the hierarchy that enables it. Throughout the piece, Sugioka, being the only human around for miles, is forced to try to reason with these machines, telling them to follow the orders he's giving them, that they need to shut down, that they're costing the company millions by working themselves to the point that they'll explode. The head robot's response is always the same. Proper protocol given by the company needs to be followed. Otherwise, there is chaos. It says that while chaos reigns around them. The short can also be seen as an indictment of the looming threat of automation. Sure, you could save money by building robots and not hiring workers, right? Robots and machines always follow the orders they're given in their programming to the T, right? Human error is non-existent. Algorithms are perfect, right? They're unbiased and they never make mistakes, right? But the satirical element doesn't fully come into its own until the last scene, where a fed-up Sugioka destroys the head robot and decides to take matters into his own hands.
I'll shut it down at the source. I'll terminate this project even if I have to destroy the whole thing to do it.
And just as he leaves the room, he gets a call.
This is an emergency transmission from corporate headquarters. Early this morning, Army units of the Republic of Arowana succeeded in overthrowing the recently installed revolutionary regime. You hear that, Sugioka? All systems are go. We're proceeding with Project 444 after all. Sugioka? Respond, please. Sugioka? Sugioka, are you there?
In the end, Sugioka, who followed his superior's orders above everything else, is now actively rebelling against them, whether he knows it or not. He's become just like the robots, creating chaos by following initial orders. So we can conclude that all three shorts work well enough on their own. how do they work together? It's obvious that when measuring Neo Tokyo as one product, you're gonna be going back and drawing comparisons to Robot Carnival. Both were anthology features that shared staff and were produced and released around the same time, so comparisons were destined to happen. In order to showcase why Neo Tokyo can work as its own feature, let's compare it to Robot Carnival, a film we know can work as its own feature. The main reasons why we know Robot Carnival can work on its own is because all of the shorts are tied together by one theme: robots. The shorts of Neo Tokyo, on the other hand, do not appear to be tied together by one singular theme. Despite being adaptations of story by the same author, you really wouldn't know that by looking at what you see on screen, because every story from animation style, to genre, to subject matter are so radically different from one another. But the shorts do share a connection, not by theme, but by mood. The mood of all three shorts are very dark and downbeat, whether it's through the sinister whimsy of expressionism to the shadow oppressiveness of noir. The overall mood throughout Neo Tokyo is a feeling of quiet unease. Compare this tone to the opening of Robot Carnival, to the opening of Neo Tokyo. Also, unlike Robot Carnival, Neo Tokyo keeps its tone throughout. While each of their shorts has their own method of expressing a moody atmosphere, it never feels like that atmosphere goes away. Even Construction Cancellation Order, the most brightly lit of all three shorts, still carries the uneasy tone of a world gone mad throughout the piece. Robot Carnival, meanwhile, changes tones constantly, one example being going from the bombastic opening to the quietly eerie Frankengears within the first few minutes. But what I think ultimately makes Neo Tokyo not just a good film in its own right, but also a better anthology feature than Robot Carnival, is that it feels way more focused on telling good stories. Sure, it may have something to do with the fact that all the shorts are adaptations of existing works, but there's clearly a lot more emphasis on having the animation serve the narrative rather than the narrative taking a back seat to the animation. Robot Carnival, while gorgeously animated throughout, suffers from the fact that it has a lot more emphasis on presentation over story. It's less a collection of short films and more fantasia, if anything. The short films of Neo Tokyo, meanwhile, never lose sight of the fact that they are supposed to be telling a story. Even narratively weak ones like Labyrinthos still have a narrative that sees it through to the end. And with the emphasis on narrative as well as having an unchanging ever-present tone throughout, Neo Tokyo ends up having a lot more consistent quality compared to Robot Carnival, where the experimental masterpiece Cloud is forced to share the same neighborhood as the cliché storm Deprive. Neo Tokyo, while being shorter and more down-key than its more grandiose sibling film, ultimately comes out stronger. But that doesn't mean you should ignore Robot Carnival in favor of Neo Tokyo. Both are important pieces of anime history that deserve any and all recognition they get. But as long as Robot Carnival is getting the limelight, maybe it can share some of that fame and recognition with its smaller, darker, and weirder twin.